He's the commissioner, Rob Manfred, who joins us now. Commissioner, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
If I take you back to mid-March and I give you a mulligan, a do-over, knowing what you know, what would you do differently?
Well, I think that the agreement that we reached in March with the players would have looked very different. I think one of the difficulties that we encountered is, we try to be proactive, try to get an agreement that addressed the situation. And frankly, the situation evolved differently than we expected and made the subsequent negotiation difficult for us, I think.
Give me a specific of what you would have put in or taken out.
Well, I just think that we would have been more explicit about the need for subsequent negotiation. I mean, I think the agreement was clear that it contemplated playing in stadiums with fans. We took we had no obligation to play unless we could play with fans, and the players understood that. We thought it made clear that there would have to be a discussion of playing empty. I think I just would have written the words, if we're going to play empty, there needs to be another negotiation. I think that negotiation probably would have gone a little differently had we done that. But, hindsight's perfect.
How would you rate the job that you did? Like where we are right now, that we're starting spring training again and we got 60 games?
Look, I think the most important thing to our fans is that we're going to make every attempt to get the game back on the field. I know some people have talked about longer seasons, 60 too short. The reality is we weren't going to play more than 60 games no matter how the negotiation with the players went or any other factor. 60 games is the outside of the envelope given the realities of the virus. And, I think this is the one thing that we come back to every single day. We're trying to manage something that has proven to be unpredictable and unmanageable. I know it hasn't looked particularly pretty in spots, but having said that, if we can pull off this 60-game season, I think it was the best we were going to do for our fans, given the course of the virus.
But even if the players accepted everything you offered, there was no way that you would have gone to 80 games. It was still going to be 60.
It's the calendar, Dan. I mean, We're playing 60 games in 63 days right now. I don't see, given how the reality of the health situation over the past few weeks, how we were going to get going any faster than the calendar we're on right now, no matter what the state of those negotiations were. And, look, we did get a suboptimal result from the negotiation in some ways. We didn't. The fans aren't going to get an expanded postseason, which I think would have been good with this shortened season. And, look, the players left real money on the table. They left $25 million worth of playoff pools, $33 million worth of salary advances. But that's what happens when you have a negotiation that instead of being collaborative gets, into sort of a conflict situation.
How many owners didn't want to resume the season?
I think if you gave everybody truth serum, there were one or two that were opposed to the idea of playing for health reasons. The vast majority of our owners wanted to play. And I think from the perspective of the owners, they're making an investment, in terms of additional losses in order to get the game back on the field, because we feel it's important to have the game back on the field. We owe it to our fans.
I'm glad you mentioned the 60 games because a source told me, and I told this audience, I don't know how many days ago, it was last week or maybe 10 days ago, that it was going to be 60 games. That was what was agreed to. No matter what the negotiations were going on, the 60 games, that was etched in stone. But, you had to have a hard out of when you were going to be playing the World Series, the playoff games. Is that fair?
I think that everybody has certain things that you accept as really good advice. One of the pieces of advice we received early on from the medical experts, the pandemic experts that we've been working with, is that by the end of September, the risk of another spike and a shutdown was going up dramatically. Given that, one of our guiding principles, we were going to finish no later than September 27th, which was the scheduled date, and we were going to play the postseason on its normal calendar. Given that hard end date, what I said about the calendar before in the 60 games, if you look around the country, okay, there was no place or no possibility of us resuming operations either in home markets or in the spring training facilities at a materially earlier time than July 1. It just was not consistent with the public health situation.
If you have to pause the season,
yes,
how long can you pause this season?
I don't have a firm number of days in mind. I think the way that I think about it, Dan, is in the vein of competitive integrity, right? In a 60-game season, if we have a team or two that's really decimated for with the number of people who have the virus and can't play for any significant period of time, it can have a real impact on the competition, and we have to think very, very hard about what we're doing.
If somebody tests positive, Brian Cashman, the Yankee GM, said the teams can't announce if they tested positive. So how do they go on the injury report? What's the designation there, Commissioner?
They're just going to be reported as being on the injured list like any other injured player. Look, I want to be really clear about this. This is not a lack of transparency issue. It is what's allowed by federal law. You're not allowed to be out there talking about somebody else's medical condition without their permission. I think that the reality in an everyday game is that people are going to kind of figure out what's going on when somebody's not present.
No, I understand what you're saying. I just didn't know what baseball,
No, we're just going to report them like as if they're an injured player, like any other injured and unable to play player.
He's the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, joining us. I'm not sure how to describe your personality here today. I mean, exasperated, defeated, drained.
I don't feel any of those things, Dan. Really, I really don't. I'm hopeful, is what I am. I'm hopeful and I'm realistic. I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to give the game back to our fans, and I'm realistic about the challenges that we face going forward.
The designated hitter, National League, is it here to stay, or is this a trial?
Look, I think it's a really important trial, is the way I would say it, Dan. I think that it is this year, for all the bad things about it, I think it does give us an opportunity. It has given us an opportunity to do something we've never been able to pull off before. We got a lot of support, both in the American and National League, for the idea that, at least in these circumstances, it made really good sense to use a designated hitter in both leagues. We'll see how our fans react. We'll see how the clubs react. But, it's a really nice opportunity to maybe get us to a situation where we have a single set of rules for both leagues.
And then the extra inning starting in the 10th with the runner on second base?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're prepared to abandon extra inning baseball permanently. I think in the context of a pandemic, when the amount of time that the players are together is an important consideration, the idea of playing 18-inning games just didn't make a lot of sense. But again, I have always liked this rule. You and I have talked about it before. I've talked to you about the fact that we used it during the WBC, and it can be really exciting. It can make for a very exciting end of the game, and it was kind of hoisted on us by the pandemic in terms of using it in the major leagues. Gives us an opportunity to let our fans see it and see whether they like it in practice.
Yeah, I understand with the shortened season and the schedule and the number of games and days that you don't want a 14, 15 inning game. Trying to do back-to-back games. I understand that. I'm for the DH. I grew up in a National League city, but I understand where we are and adding more excitement here. So I could see where you would probably. How many? If I said right now, how many owners would want this, and would the Baseball Players Association vote for this for the DH? How do you think that would turn out?
The Players Association has historically been in favor of the universal DH. I think most American League owners are obviously in favor of the designated hitter rule. That's their game. I think what's happened in recent years is you have more and more National League owners who are open to the idea. Let me go back to the extra innings thing for just a second. And I think this is important. One of the things that we've done from a health perspective is try to minimize the amount of time our players are together. And that was really the driving issue on extra inning games. You play an 18-inning game, it makes for a very, very long day in the dugout, in a clubhouse, in a relatively confined area. So, that one was really a pandemic-driven rule more than anything else.
You have keeping everybody safe, replacing the baseballs. There's no spitting. You can't argue with the umpire, I'm guessing. Can't be, if somebody throws inside, you can't go to the mound. And I mean, these, how are you going to police this?
Look, I think that as with any set of rules, the most important thing is self-policing. I think the players understand that these protocols are necessary to keep them safe and keep the game going. We are going to be constantly and closely monitoring adherence to the protocols. But I will say, I talked to a number of clubs yesterday as players are reporting, and I was really heartened by the fact that it kind of uniformly what clubs are saying is, players have been great about this. They have masks on. You don't have to tell them to wear them when they're off the field. They're doing the right thing. And that's good. That's good because you don't have enough policemen to, make sure everybody's doing the right thing. You have to rely on the fact that we educate the players, explain to them why we're doing what we're doing, and they self-police.
Would you be in favor of shortening the season as we move forward?
No, not materially. I mean, I've always been open to the idea that, within the historical bounds, which I see is 154 to 162, depending on what we were doing with playoff formats and whatever, that I would be open to that kind of adjustment, but not a material adjustment. Look, a big part of our game and one of the biggest hurdles that we had to get over from a competitive perspective in terms of putting a 60-game season out there. There's a huge competitive difference between a 60-game spread and a 162-game marathon. It's kind of like saying, would you be in favor of making the New York Marathon 13 miles? I think the answer is no, right?
No, then I could run it. So,
well, yeah, you could, I couldn't.
What about how does seating work in the dugout?
There are going to be actual markings in the dugout that will lay out the social distancing and during the period of time, which may be, the whole season where we're not having fans in the stands, we're actually going to expand outside the physical dugout itself, use some of the front rows of the stands.
What are you doing the rest of the day?
What I'm doing the rest of the day is more Zoom calls. I have the club presidents group today. I've tried to, communicate on a very consistent basis with the important groups in the industry, the control people, meaning the 30 owners, the general managers, the club presidents, and I've had regular calls with them. Today's President's Day. This will be a very busy call because there's a lot of operational issues that we need to review and make sure the clubs are on board on. I said to the clubs after we announced the season that, there's been all this activity in terms of the negotiation and whatnot, in terms of getting back on the field. But now we return to the more normal situation in our game. This is about what the clubs are doing. And so communicating with them in this unique situation, really important.
I know it's only 1 year, but I really feel bad for these minor leaguers and these minor league cities that, they got crushed here, Commissioner.
They did. And look, I want to be as clear about this as possible. We think minor league baseball is an important part of not just our business, but of the fabric of American life. And it was simply impossible to do enough testing and to get protocols in place in 160 minor league cities and provide any assurance that we could keep those players safe. And while it's disappointing, and I feel bad for the minor league operators and the minor league players, what happened here with this season, I think, is the most concrete demonstration of the fact that we have put player safety first in terms of the decisions we've made.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, Commissioner. Good luck.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
That's Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball Commissioner.